class, it's Mr. Harvey. This is the first time that I've done this. I'm going to create videos for you. I'm going to try to do this more regularly to give you a chance to, at home or wherever you are, just kind of come back, either come back from class after we've learned something, or in this case, before we even start to learn about it in class, just to get a little primer, to get a little bit of information to let you know where we're going. And so I'll use it for those purposes. Hopefully you like these. I'm going to try to add, if I can, some different elements to it, right? Maybe some different graphics other than just what's on the board or something. But I'm giving it a go, all right? It's not Mr. Betts, but I'm trying. All right, so we're going to, you guys are welcome back from your snow break, by the way. We're going to start talking about the Civil War. And we've got a lot to cover in a short amount of time. So I'm going to try to make this video as quick as possible. I've got some notes to help me through this, but we're going to start talking about what led up to this conflict, what led up to this war. So the Civil War is a war between Americans, right? It's Americans fighting against Americans. And why did we end up fighting each other? Well, there's a lot of reasons. There's a lot of speculation. You'll hear a lot of different things. But one thing is for certain, at the heart of the conflict, at the heart of why we fought, is differences that arise between parts of our country, and those differences are about the issue of slavery. And so you have already sort of learned the word sectionalism. I'll give you a quick rundown of that in a minute. But like I just said, slavery is the thing that really is going to drive this. In our country, you know, we started off, our nation began with slavery as an institution, with people who were brought here from other places, mostly Africa. But as we learned, there were others enslaved, like Native Americans. But by the time we get to where we're at right now, when we say enslaved people, we're generally talking about African Americans, people brought from Africa to America. And the people that we will be talking about during the 1800s were born into slavery. So these are not people that have just been brought over. This is year after year. This is generations of slavery in America. And so it's sort of in the fabric of our country. We talked about the Constitution. There were even compromises made around the issue of slavery to get our Constitution passed. So we have this long history of slavery being an issue, and that's really going to come to a boil. Slavery was more and more a controversial issue. People in our country took one side or the other. So the real question with slavery was, should our nation continue to allow slavery? And should we continue to allow it as we grow? We're a growing country. America is not, you know, a small 13 colony, 13 state nation. We're growing, we're expanding. As we grow, what kind of country do we want to be? Do we need to change? Are we going to keep doing things the way we've been doing? And again, at the heart of that is slavery. Do we allow slavery to exist or not? Is it right or is it wrong? Is it needed or should we get rid of it? That's the question that fuels controversy, disagreement, and ultimately violence, a war. And so during this time, you have you know, abolitionists, who are people who abolition means the banning of or the removing of the system of slavery, getting rid of slavery. So if you're an abolitionist, you're a person who believes we need to get rid of slavery. Slavery does not have a place in our country anymore. We should stop. We should just stop. So the abolitionist movement gains a lot of speed. You've got different people that are involved in that abolitionist movement. You have people like Frederick Douglass, who was born into slavery, who gets his freedom, right? He runs away. He and he moves to the north, and he begins to write, he begins to speak. He's very outspoken about abolition, about getting rid of slavery. You also have Sojourner Truth, very similar situation, born into slavery, finds her way to freedom, and begins to speak out against slavery. And then you also have, you have some people that are former slaves, but you also have some people like this man here. This is William Lloyd Garrison. He's white, he's from the North, and he starts a newspaper advocating or promoting abolition. He believes in getting rid of slavery, and he is part of, again, making that topic kind of front and center in America. So people in America at this time would have been more and more, not everybody was, but more and more aware of the issue, and many of them were starting to take one side or the other. Well, what side you took on that would often depend on where you're from. So just like I mentioned before, we talked about sectionalism. Sectionalism is when you have kind of this strong preference and allegiance to your section or your region of a country rather than the whole. So instead of being like really proud to be an American, you're really proud of being an American from this region. And so we have that going on during this time, and specifically between the North and the South. So people who are from the South, they more identify as Southerners than they do as like Americans with everybody. And people from the North, they more identify as Northerners rather than American. They don't see themselves as very similar. They're more proud of and more devoted to kind of the values and the place that they're from rather than the country as a whole. Well, again, what's going to fuel that is not just slavery. There's a lot of other things that go into that. But when we look at places like the North, we see that the North has a larger population. They have larger cities, and they have more industry. They have more factories, more trading, more merchants. And so those cities have factories. They have a greater diversity, more people from different parts of the world with different ideas. The North has a better education system than the South does. And so for all these reasons, they start to develop, this is who we are. This is the kind of place we are. And because they're mostly industrial, they have factories and trading and things like that, they don't rely on slave labor. So they don't feel any kind of need to keep slavery in the United States of America. On the other side, you got the southern states. And those southern states are mostly farming and rural communities, not cities, small towns, or just countryside farms, plantations, large farms. And those plantations are mostly where slave labor, people who are enslaved, are going to work. And so the southern economy relies on slave labor and the system of slavery to succeed. Without it, they feel that they cannot thrive. They can't make money. They can't continue to exist if they lose the system of slavery that they feel keeps them alive and keeps them succeeding and going forward. So there you have it. There's the difference between the two. We'll get into that more this week in our lessons. And so that difference is going to be what fuels the controversy. And the controversy comes when we start to grow out into this territory that we gained. Remember, we started over here and we start moving west. That's what we talked about before you had your snow break. When these places go from just being land we own to being territories and then to becoming states in our country, like actual official states in the United States, then the question is, well, what kind of state are they? Are they a slave state just like the other states in the South? Right? So if people move to this new state, can they bring their slaves with them? Can they bring the system of slavery with them and open a plantation and utilize slave labor just like the states in the South do? Or are they free states like those in the North, which do not allow slavery? So do we want them to be places where people are enslaved or not. That's going to cause major conflict. And so, again, you can see that how you feel about that's going to depend on where you live. And it's not just going to be a conflict of words, right, of ideas. People don't just disagree in conversation and in debate. It's actually going to lead to violence, and we'll see some of that this week as well. And you have some examples down here of before the Civil War even begins. We out here in this area, Kansas, Nebraska, Missouri, we start to see physical violence. People who are so passionate about being pro or anti-slavery that they start to fight. And so we have conflict that's just brewing. And finally, that conflict is going to, and that tension is going to reach a boiling point, and this is the last part here, when this guy in the middle here is elected president. It's Abraham Lincoln. He's elected in 1860. He's the first Republican president of the United States. The Republican Party was brand new, and the Republican Party started as a party opposed to slavery. They were a party that believed slavery did not have a place. We needed to stop the growth of slavery. We needed to eventually get rid of slavery. And so he's elected as president, and that's going to set off a chain reaction that's going to lead us to the war. Because as you can imagine, these people down here in the southern states who want to keep slavery around are not going to be pleased that this new president has been elected, and they know this guy is not for our way of life. He's not from the South. He's from up here. Right? He has ideas like they do up there, and it's going to lead to conflict. So that's all we're going to cover right now. Hopefully this gets you ready for our lessons this week. And again, I'll continue to make these videos if I can. I'll try to make them more interesting. Hopefully you got something out of this. I'll see you guys this week.